I'm happy and thrilled to be accompanied by Alison Bateman-House, who comes to us from New York University. She's an ethicist extraordinaire and has immense experience in all of these areas. In keeping with my normal theme of the week, I've been not Amanda, not Pat, and now I'm not Catherine Beaverson. But I know that this is an incredibly important topic to Catherine Beaverson, so I will try to make her proud. I'm just going to start by saying that when I am a mom. I was going to say when I was a mom. I guess I'm always a mom. My kids were much younger. They'd come to me and they'd say things like, you know, I didn't get invited to the party. I didn't get to do this. I didn't get to do that. And my theme was always, life's not fair, because sometimes I just didn't have an answer. And that was a really hard thing to say to something as trivial to me, not to them, as I didn't get invited to the slumber party. But when we talk about treatments, diagnosis, management of our children, people making decisions for them and for us that maybe we don't feel like we had a lot of input into, that feels really unfair. So is there a playbook for how these decisions are going to be made around gene therapy? And we're all thrilled that it's here, but how are we going to decide? We don't have an endless supply of vector. We don't have an endless supply of drug. So how do we decide who goes first?
Well, I just want to say we've been having variations of this conversations for several years now, saying, you know, one of these days we'll have a gene therapy, and how is it going to be distributed, and who will get it first, and, you know, will it go to the younger boys or the older boys, et cetera. So now we're over that hump. We have one gene therapy. It has accelerated approval, which you know, is a slightly different twist on what we might have thought was coming. So that's something else to think about. But now we have some answers. You know, we said before, would it be the youngest, most unaffected children or older children? We know as of right now, the label is for 4 and 5-year-olds. Mm-hmm. That may well change once the confirmatory trial is done, et cetera. But to get back to your question, is there a playbook? No, there's no playbook. Just like if I went around and asked every single one of you what you thought would be the fairest way to allocate a limited amount of drug, I'd probably get numerous different responses. That's the way it is. And companies have these conversations internally and externally, and with you know, themselves and with people like me who they bring in as consultants and try to figure out you know, if they have a limited amount of supply, you know, if they have commitments that they've made to certain patient groups, or if they have long-standing relationships with certain institutions, et cetera, how best to try to allocate these drugs. And then, of course, when you get into the pricing issue, as was so eloquently said in the last panel, you could have the best plan in the world, but if a payer is not willing to pay for something, it's not going to move. So the point is, no, there's no like guidebook for this. There's no one size fits all. We could talk about what happened with SMA. We could talk about what happened with Zolgensma. I think there are lessons to be learned from those situations, Luxturna, all the rest of them, but there's no guarantee that what's going to happen here is what happened there. And as I said a minute ago, this Sarepta approval is an accelerated approval, which adds a little bit of a twist because, you know, the Novartis approval, Luxturna, et cetera, were not.
So maybe talk a little bit about how that was different. Maybe everyone doesn't understand that, just quickly.
Okay, so I'm an ethicist, not a regulatory person, but just to say, at least how I understand it, it is a full FDA approval. FDA will say, you know, an accelerated approval is an approval, but basically what it says is that it's sort of contingent on an ongoing trial, this confirmatory trial. The results are supposed to be out in the fall, and in theory, if the results are not supportive, the accelerated approval could be pulled. Sarepta could choose to withdraw its marketing application itself, or we could get into a mess. We just recently had a case, for those of you who might have followed it, of McKenna, which was a drug that had accelerated approval. The confirmatory trial failed, and it still managed to stay on the market something like 9 years. So accelerated approval is a little unpredictable sometimes.
Okay. So some of the things that we don't have to worry about, we know for sure that it's going to be 4 and 5-year-olds. We know for sure that it's not mutation specific. So that does make it a little bit more equitable. And
we
a little
know
more
for sure it's
accessible.
4 and 5-year-olds unless the confirmatory trial gives data that FDA goes back and says, okay, we're willing to widen the label because of this new data. I doubt they would narrow the label, but they really could do anything. Yes, and yes.
And not exons 8 and 9. I misspoke, so I'm sorry. So I think sometimes people or families, parents, think that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You know, if I get in there and I really, maybe my center isn't providing gene therapy, but I know another center that does provide gene therapy, and if I really get in there and hound that center, that I'll get to the front of the line. Ethically, how does that fit in with decision making, do you think?
Well, let's not even
providers?
talk ethics for a second. Let's just talk practicality. Okay? Because remember we said we have a limited amount of supply.
Right.
So where is that limited amount of supply going to be allocated? Is it only for the United States? Has Sarepta sought approval for other countries? There are some countries in the world where as soon as you get approval from the FDA, you have a green light to sell product in their countries. So is this drug at this point in time only going to be used in the United States? Given its price tag, I'm going to say probably, just because, you know, there are not many places in the world that can afford a drug that's expensive, but just questions to ask. And then, you know, as we were talking about earlier, this is, yes, it's a one-time drug, although we aren't necessarily sure it's going to provide lifetime benefits, but it's a one-time drug, but then it's a lifetime of follow-up, and that requires institutional commitment. So the question for each institution to ask is, how many of these patients are we going to be able to treat? And if an institution says, you know, seriously, thinking about all the resources that are involved, we're only going to be able to treat 1 or 2 patients, you know, you suddenly are looking at a very different map of where this drug could be distributed. So if you have a squeaky wheel at institution X, but they've already allocated the 2 slots that they think that they can handle, that squeakiness is not going to help.
Right.
That being said, if they have not yet allocated those 2 slots, and you happen to be the squeaky wheel, sure, maybe you will be the person who gets one of those slots. Now, ethically, is that something I would condone? No, I would not necessarily condone that, but people are going to do what they are going to do for the ones that they love, and I think we all understand that.
When I think historically, people have come from far, far away to centers that provide these therapies because they can gain access to these therapies. But you're right, there's going to be so much follow-up, and most of these studies are 5-year follow-up. So getting access to that institution for 5 years is going to be relatively difficult, I would think.
And I just want to point out that these are, just talking about the Sarepta gene therapy at the moment, it's still a new novel intervention. You know, I don't know anything more than y'all know about its safety or efficacy or what have you, but we don't know what's going to happen 3 years down the line or 18 months down the line, et cetera. And I think for the safety of the patient, as well as, you know, us learning about the longitudinal effect of the drug, you're going to want to make sure you have that support team there to be able to follow up. And
then we were talking about combination therapies a little bit earlier, just the question of how we were talking just amongst ourselves, how those companies or those patients who have already been on exon skipping therapies, for example, and then want to go back and get gene therapy, there haven't been any investigation of those combinations and safety and efficacy. So then our payer is going to decide whether we're not paying for anything, or so there's lots of decision making around that.
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time advising pharmaceutical companies, patient advocacy groups, sometimes payers, sometimes policymakers of different ilks, when they're trying to make decisions about, how do we allocate drugs or other products. And the one thing that I hear over and over and over, well, I guess the two things I hear over and over again is we don't want to cause harm. In trying to help people, we don't want to hurt them. So maybe we're willing to be a little overly cautious because we really don't want to hurt people. And you can agree or disagree with that, but that is a comment that I hear over and over and over again. And then sort of hand in hand with that is the statement that in order to make decisions that they feel confident are not going to harm people, they want evidence. So that's why when I am advising people, I'm always pushing to try to have the strongest possible clinical trial, to collect the strongest possible real-world data, whatever it is, because I want data that's going to be convincing to the FDA or whatever other regulator we're talking about in the world. I want data that's going to be convincing to payers, and I want data that's going to be convincing to individual clinicians and formulary committees of institutions when they're deciding what drugs to allow their institutions to stock. And all of those decisions tend to hinge on the strength of evidence. So I was saying earlier, I was involved in allocation decisions with drugs for SMA. It was for a humanitarian aid organization. It was particularly for Spinraza, and people got Spinraza for free for life every few months, and some of these people started coming back and reporting to us that by hook or crook they had had Zolgensma, and the medical advisory board really sort of pulled up short and said there is no data at this point in time about what happens if you have Spinraza and Zolgensma, and can we possibly continue treating someone with Spinraza without evidence to tell us that this is safe? And they stopped. People who had sort of won the lottery to get free lifetime Spinraza were removed from the program and told, sorry, we never told you up front you couldn't have Zolgensma, just because we never really thought it was a possibility, but we're worried about the safety of that combination and we're not willing to treat you anymore. Later, a paper was published from Germany that showed just a case report of a handful of patients who had had both and seemed to be doing well. And the humanitarian aid organization reversed its policy. But that's just an example to show this sort of reluctance to do things without evidence. And I think we're going to see that a lot right now, whether that's doctors trying to prescribe this drug off-label outside the 4 to 5 year-old window, or trying to prescribe combination therapies or anything.
So right now that we have 4 and 5-year-olds, the combination therapy outside of steroids is probably a minimal issue. And as much as we want this label broadened, the more it gets broadened, the more the combination therapies issue is going to come up, and the more complicated this is going to be.
Right.
It's going to be a wild one. So I had a grandmother this week that said, I want to get on a soapbox and I want to tell everybody how incredibly well my grandson's doing on this gene therapy, but I feel so guilty. So how do you manage your own excitement and your own expectations, and also manage your guilt and remain sensitive to the rest of the community who maybe doesn't have access to this? right now?
Well, survivor's guilt is obviously a real thing. I mean, if you look at the people who survived 9/11 or any sort of massive tragedy, the people who survived, have this enormous feeling of why me and shame almost about, other people didn't make it, but I did. And now I have to go do something extraordinary with my life to make it, make my luck have a reason or something. I want to encourage people not to feel like that. I think at this point in time, when we're dealing with these novel drugs, every single person who gets the drug, whether you're in a clinical trial, whether you're dealing with a newly approved drug, you're all contributing to the knowledge base that is going to help the next generation of patients. And as long as you are, doing your best to try to, take the drug as prescribed, to be honest with your treating clinicians about side effects that come up as they come up, and really, to the extent you can, share your experiences with other people to help them with their decision making. I think you're being a gold star patient, and there's nothing else to ask of you, and I would encourage you not to feel shame. Every single aspect of healthcare in this country, let alone the world, is rationed. It's just that we don't normally see it. This just happens to be a case where the veil is pulled back and we see that some people get things and other people don't. Whereas for things like dialysis units or, convalescent plasma or something, it's not as obvious.
I think I guess the message is we just have to remain compassionate to each other, and I think everybody wants the best for everybody and treatments for all. So this generation is going to be messy and it's going to be complicated, and this is just baby steps.
Yeah, I mean, this is the process getting worked out. Mm-hmm. And when processes are getting worked out, it's always ugly. It's like when you're baking brownies and like the flour's flying and the cocoa powder is going somewhere else and the dog's at your feet like licking things up as you're trying to maneuver around. It's a disaster, but then at the end you have brownies and it was all worthwhile. So
I think that's a really good analogy. We'll just picture ourselves as brownies here.
Sweet treat of your choice.
That's why sweet treat of your choice. Well, thank you so much. Do you have any other comments that you'd like to make?
No, I just want to say, it's been an honor to come to this meeting every few years and to get to know this community. And I know that y'all have been so anxious waiting for this day. And I'm so glad that we're finally here. And I know it's going to be painful and rocky still for a bit. But I'm just really, really happy for y'all.
Yes, us too. And as messy and as complicated as this is, we'll get through it together and one step at a time, right? Thanks.
Do we want to ask if there are any
Does anybody
questions?
have any questions, any ethical issues? And I'll try to put my sunglasses on and see who's speaking. Joanna? All right, run. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
It's just an issue. Again, obviously, it's passionate to me because I have two children with Duchenne. But it seems to me that I've been screaming from the rooftops, since they were diagnosed, and it's still it's not a standard that one sibling gets in a clinical trial and the other doesn't. And again, I've been on umpteen panels, Pfizer, a bunch more. And I just, when we talk about ethics, it's unbelievable to me that, there was one company at this point that has made it a standard. So it's not really a question, it's more of just a comment, and I figured maybe, if I didn't scream enough 10 years ago, if I have to keep screaming, I'll keep screaming, so.
Yeah.
I'll just say that some of my students and I actually wrote a paper exactly on this issue. And we did not come out and say, like, for non-trial eligible siblings, give them access through expanded access. We did not say that, but we also did not say that. We said, this is a complicated issue, and what we want you to at least think through as a company is realize the stress that you're putting on the families, the sort of emotional pain of knowing one child is at least having a chance at a therapy while the other one is not, but at the same time understanding that, it may be good if this particular novel agent is a dud, given the one-time dosing of the nature, that you are preserving the potentially younger child's chance to have another go. So we were trying to be nuanced and at least be like, here's your checklist of things that you really need to think about. And if it's not a younger child, if it's the older child, then that's a different equation altogether. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I hear you.
No,
I hear
really.
you, and I was trying to amplify that for
thank
others.
You.
So.
Thank you. I just, again, it's obviously I have 2 children, and I know I'm not the only one that has multiple children. And
well, and in genetic diseases, that's the case,
it's gonna
right?
happen.
You frequently have a second child before the first child gets diagnosed.
Absolutely,
so.
absolutely. So,
But
anyway,
that is
you.
a really good way to think about it. I think we have thought about, not child A, but child B. But if when you think about preserving child A for a potential child that may not work in child B, it takes on a whole new perspective. So.
And one of the other things, not dealing with trials per se, but just dealing with sibling dynamics that we have tried to make a point of pointing out to companies, is that childhood is a formative time for sibling relationships. And just given the amount of time that you have to have separation, et cetera, anything you can do to try to diminish that time that siblings are separated, whether it's they can come to, or whether you enable, video chats or whatever it is that's developmentally appropriate for that child, that's one way to, lessen one tiny little detrimental effect of these long distance separations.
Yes.
But it is hard.
Yes. Agreed. All right, thank you.
I think that the comments you just made, I know you can't see me from behind the podium there.
Haman, speak up, because like Pat said, we can't hear the mic.
Really?
Sorry.
Okay. You have made some lovely comments just now about the impact on the psychosocial elements of therapy on the family. As physicians, we have a responsibility, not only of fiscal responsibility, but also an ethical responsibility to our patients in providing the most optimal amount of care, which is ideally science-driven. I was wondering if you could comment on one aspect, which is the clinician's responsibility when it comes to drugs that have no clear proven benefit yet are available on the market. So, in 2018, only about 7 or 8% of drugs got expedited approval. And over the last year or two, we've seen this number jump to about 55% of the drugs getting expedited FDA approval, conditionally, of course. But you mentioned McKenna, which has been on the market now for about a decade. I was wondering specifically to the clinician, if you could comment on some of our decision-making algorithms and maybe our responsibilities as we navigate this somewhat murky time, because a number of these agents are coming online with conditional approval. Thank you.
So I just want to make sure I heard your question, because there is an echo up here. You're saying, is there an ethical responsibility of the clinician with regard to the fact that a number of these drugs have sort of conditional approval as opposed to full approval?
That's correct.
Okay.
With possible questionable efficacy?
Yes, especially so. Or thus far, no demonstrable efficacy.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
Or no demonstrated efficacy thus far.
No demonstrated efficacy. Okay.
So I'm
Thanks.
a big believer in not putting on individuals responsibility that belongs on a system. And I think we have a system issue that drugs are coming available without proof of efficacy. I think there's a reason that we have accelerated approval. I think that it's a good pathway. My concern about accelerated approval, and I wrote this in the New York Times, so this is not a surprise that this is my stance, was that many of the confirmatory trials were not being conducted, or at least were not being conducted in a timely manner. So I was sort of okay with the idea of in certain circumstances with dire diseases, et cetera, let people try these drugs in certain circumstances as long as there's a confirmatory trial that's going to be done quickly. And it looks like FDA is now taking steps to really enforce that. And hopefully, if the confirmatory trial is not successful, to be able to have more muscle to get those drugs off the market. So I think this is a structural issue, and I'm not sure how much we should hold the individual physician accountable for sort of dealing with these issues. That being said, I teach med students, and I routinely encounter people who have no idea how drugs are approved. When I ask them about prescribing something, I'll say, is this an on-label or an off-label use? They don't know. I'll say something like, do you have any idea how much this is going to cost your patient? They don't know. So I think there's lots of things that clinicians could and should be doing to be a better advocate for their patient when it comes to prescribing drugs for them. But I don't think it really deals with the realm of conditional approval as much as some of these things like better understanding the evidence base behind that drug and why their peers are using it for a particular condition.
Hi, I'm Colin Worth. I'm the president of the PPMD Adult Advisory Committee. I just wanted to thank you for your comments and also thank you for the work that you're doing in ethics. But I just wanted to say, and I think as adults and non-ambulatory individuals, I think there is definitely a lack of inclusion of this population in trials, and I'm working on a project for this, trying to outreach to pharma companies and talk to them about this process. So, yeah, just wanted to thank you for the work you're doing, and introduce myself, and I'd love to talk to you more in person. So I didn't speak to you tonight. So just thank you.
Yeah, I heard that you wanted to introduce yourself, so thank you for that. And I
Yes.
would love to talk to you afterwards where we can talk without an echo.
There's a lot of echo.
I'll come find you as soon as I get off the stage. How about that?
Any other comments or questions that we may or may not be able to hear?
We can't see you.
We can't see you. We can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Well, if not, thank you very much, Allison.
All right, thank you all.